right, great. So, hello, thank you for coming. My name is Mick. You may have seen my imposter monster zines, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs. Some of the words that I use to talk about my identities are like I'm fat, I'm queer, I'm genderqueer, I'm disabled, I'm chronically ill, and I'm white. So those are some of the things that might help you know about me. I am also cited, that I wanted to mention that this is a screen reader workshop. I'm cited. I don't use a screen reader. I worked to develop my first screen reader zines with one of my best friends who is blind and uses a screen reader. And so that is, I generally feel a little weird about speaking on behalf of someone else's disability, but as this is mostly like a workshop for other sighted people to make zines more accessible in general, I feel like that's an okay crossover to have, especially since I developed it with somebody that is blind. So hopefully this is going to be something that can help you create greater access with your zines. Another place you might know me from is I work with the doula project. I'm a full spectrum doula in New York City. So I support people who are giving birth and having abortions and experiencing a loss like stillbirth. And I also was the editor of the Doula Project's zine, which is DIY Doula, self-care for before, during, and after your abortion. And yeah, so a lot of my zines focus around self-advocacy and disability, and I'm working on right now about medical self-advocacy. And it never even occurred to me in the past to make screen reader versions of my zines, because to me, zines were such a physical print medium. I didn't offer digital zines prior to the pandemic, but when COVID happened and we all started doing virtual fests and things like that, I started selling on Etsy a lot more than I had previously. I started to offer digital editions, and then it kind of clicked for me, like, well, if I have a digital edition, why can't I offer a screen reader edition? And I'm sure that there are topics that are relevant to lots of folks who are using screen readers. Zines are such a great medium of a way to create media that popular media isn't talking about, right? But if it's not accessible to everybody, that's not ideal. So in this workshop, we are going to start by talking about writing image descriptions. Has anybody here had experience with writing image descriptions, like maybe on your Instagram, or if you tabled at this fair, you would have had to write some for your webpage? Okay. So we'll start talking about that, and we'll talk about some best practices for that. And because that's kind of like your jumping off point is writing image descriptions. And then I have sort of developed my own system for writing screen reader editions of zines, and I will share it with you. And it may be something that you want to follow the same format, or you may take pieces of it and decide that part of it works for you and part of it doesn't. Let me first give you a link that has a lot of good best practices for, I'm putting it in the chat here. This is like good. I'm actually at my friend's house, and her seeing eye dog is like my best friend. And so the seeing eye dog I can hear is sitting right outside the door. So Carolyn is right outside the door going, "Uncle Nick, what are you doing? Are you coming out to play with me soon?" Okay, so do we have any questions so far? Okay. So this image description, an image description is basically a written caption, right? That captures the essential information in an image. Something that I did not know until I had a conversation with my friend Sarah about it was that you would think that our technology has gotten to a place where, say, if you're on Facebook, that it could do a pretty good job of giving you, identifying what is in a photo. Considering that when I search my Google photos, where I, back up my photos, if I search in there disability, it'll pull up all of my disability stickers and all of my disability zines. Or if I search flowers, it will pull up all of my flowers, my photos of flowers. However, that technology is not applied broadly on the internet. So if you are scrolling through Facebook using a screen reader, or you are scrolling through Facebook using or Instagram using a screen reader, then you are going to get like very, very little useful information. You might get a image description that says something like, photo may contain text. So all those memes that you see circulating that are like screen grabs of Tumblr pages or screen grabs of Twitter, and it's just an image, those like people using screen readers, they cannot see those at all unless you have underneath, you have the caption that, contains the actual text of what it says. So, or like, you would think like, okay, well, maybe it can't handle all that text. Okay, like let's say a photo, there's like two children like playing in the sand at the beach, and like it will say something like may contain beach, or like may contain outdoor area or something. It's the what it gives is like very, very vague and not generally useful. So that's why you need an image description, basically. And so how to write a good image description is generally the object, the action, and the context. And this is all in the link that I put in the chat, if you'd like to follow along. And so the object is like basically the main focus, and the action describes what's happening, usually what the object is doing, and the context describes the surrounding environment. And this also talks about how, and this is a conversation I've had with people too, about how what is considered essential is very subjective, right? Some people like to have a lot of information given to them. Some people like to keep it very minimal. So when you are giving your image descriptions, it's helpful if you can give like the most important information first. And then if you want to provide more details, you can provide that afterwards. That way, if somebody wants to kind of pass over those further details, they can skip ahead, and they don't necessarily need to, if they're like, okay, got it, I can move on to the next one. So let me see if I can share my screen here. Can we turn screen sharing on? Can I be allowed to share my screen?
I'm not the most technologically savvy.
That's okay, take your time.
And I'm not exactly sure how I would, got it, never mind, figured it out. Okay, you should be able to do it now.
Okay, let's give it another try. Oh, here we go. No, I gotta go into my settings. This is not my usual computer. I'm not at home. Allow, yes. Sorry, everybody.
Left my tea on my desk, so I'm gonna grab that. But I will be here in case I need to fiddle with some settings that I don't understand.
Okay, here we go. Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to quit and come back, otherwise I won't record it. So give me 2 seconds.
For sure. I am actually starting to make a zine that won't be digital, but I always publish digital. Oh, they left.
Okay, here we go.
Do I need to allow you to do it again? Or
No, I think we're
okay.
good now. Okay, so that till later. So like we were talking about, can everybody hear me still? Yeah. Okay. So what we were talking about was this, and do we still have the captions on? I just can't see them because I'm in the screen sharing mode. Yeah, okay. So this is the object action context that we were talking about. And so the example of that, we're going to scroll down. So here's a photo. And we've got the Black Lives Matter sign. And so the description that they used is a Black Lives Matter sign is being held in a crowd. The object is the Black Lives Matter sign. The action is being held in a crowd and is being held, and the context is in a crowd. Now, it's telling us that we can add a lot more detail to this description. But like I was saying, if you want to do that, you want to add it after that, like a very simple what's going on here. That way people can skip over that later. And so I think I can stop the share for now. We'll come back to things later. There's a couple of other best practices that you should think about in terms of writing image descriptions. One is that if you are describing someone's gender, it's usually like if it's your own zine and you know that this is like a man or a woman or a non-binary person, then it's your own zine and it's fine to like label them as such. But if you have a random photo that you have found and you're image describing it, or it's something that you're sharing on the internet, then it's best to just describe the physical attributes of the person. So like the person has long hair, or the person is wearing glasses, or they're tall, or they're short, or whatever, and not just and not assume that like a person is a man because they are presenting masculine, or a woman because they're presenting feminine, or any of those things. The link that I gave you also has some good stock photo stuff of disabled BIPOC folks and that have image descriptions if you'd like to look at some of those. The other thing that that this talks about as being important is if you are describing race, like you don't want to just assume that everybody's white by default. So you either want to like consistently describe everyone's race and not just people of color. Like, so when I post my stickers on my, or my zines on my Instagram, if I'm holding one, I'll say a white hand is holding. this sticker, rather than just saying, oh, it must be the default because it's white, right? And the other, if you generally don't describe it, then you would only describe it if it's like critical to the message of the photo. So any questions so far about any of this? Okay. So there's also some, in this link, there's more information about like if you're describing like a complicated diagram and things like that, and that might be helpful for you to look through if you are, if you have like complicated panels in your zine or anything like that. We won't get into the nitty gritty of that for the moment. What we are going to do is we're going to look at a couple of practice image descriptions. Let's see here. And if anyone would like to volunteer to take a stab at, I think what we'll do is everybody can try practicing to write an image description, and then maybe somebody would feel like volunteering to share theirs. I think that's what we'll do. And I have two different photos. They're both a little silly, so that you can have something a little unusual to try to describe. So let me try and share again here. Okay, can everybody see that? So take a couple minutes, and remember you want to talk about the object, the action, and the context. Okay, I'll take 1 or 2 more minutes to do this one. Okay, everybody ready? All right. Does anybody feel like sharing their caption? Their image description? You could either unmute yourself and read it, or you could put it in the chat, whichever you prefer.
I can.
Okay, great.
I'll read it just because I wrote it on my phone, and so I have to type it. Oh gosh. Okay. I said, a light-skinned person with short brown hair and a gray suit with a tie is sitting in a white bathtub filled with water. They are looking at the camera with a slight smile, and a yellow rubber duck is on their head. Behind them is a white wall, and to the left is a closed window. They are only visible from the waist up.
Can you read that one more time?
Sorry, yeah.
That's fine.
A light-skinned person with short brown hair and a gray suit with a tie is sitting in a white bathtub filled with water. They are looking at the camera with a slight smile, and a yellow rubber duck is on their head. Behind them is a white wall, and to the left is a closed window. They are only visible from the waist up.
Yeah. One comment I have is that to me, the rubber ducky felt more important than the white bathtub, than the fact that the bathtub was white. I think, let's see how I had a person in a suit and tie is sitting in a bathtub looking at the camera with a slight smile on their face and a rubber ducky on their head. And then I went on to some of the finer details. And there's not like a right and a wrong way to do this. These are just like different ways of doing it. And it will vary from person to person using a screen reader what way they prefer. So these are just different varieties on it. So a person in a suit and tie is sitting in a bathtub looking at the camera with a slight smile on their face and a rubber ducky on their head. The person has short brown hair. The bathtub is a deep white standalone tub next to a window. So I kind of tried to shove all of the room details at the end of it so that if somebody wanted to skip over that part, they could. But yeah, that's, I think, overall, I liked that we both had the like slight smile.
Yeah, I
like,
know.
how should I interpret that face?
Yeah,
Did
I
anybody else
tend
have
to
any
write.
comments on that?
Oh, I was just saying, I tend to write mine based on how I first see the image, I guess. And when I first saw it, the white bathtub takes up so much space in the photo that is one of the first things that I actually noticed, even though the yellow is bright. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
No, that's totally fair. I think I just said that they were sitting in a bathtub, and then I came back to the details about the bathtub later. So yeah, it's just totally different ways of. I think they both work equally well. I have one more silly photo for us to practice on. I think somebody else just joined us, right? I'm in the like gallery view.
Yes,
So.
Sarah just joined us, and I did want to let them know that we are recording this workshop because there's at least one person who wants people to view this later. So just so you know, if you have any concerns about that, you can drop it in the chat.
And what let me also resend this link. We started, we're starting with talking about image descriptions because that's one of the like building blocks to be able to do a screen reader version of anything really. And this website that I'm linking has like a guide on how to do that. And now we are going to do one more practice of a image description. I have another silly photo, and everybody can take a minute to describe this image, and then we'll see if anybody feels like sharing theirs. Okay, let's see. Nope, hang on. There we go. Can you see that? Okay, so take a couple minutes to describe. I Googled silly stock photos. Okay, take another minute or two. And does anybody want to share the description of this friend? You can either do so in the chat or unmuting yourself.
I can.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. I wrote, a small dog with big ears is driving a red moped. The dog is wearing round goggles, a blue bandana, and a red helmet, and is sticking its tongue out. The background is white and the dog is centered in the photo.
Yeah. That's very similar to what I wrote. Does anybody else have anything different or any comments about that? I want to be this dog's friend. Okay. Let's stop that share for a minute. And then, okay, does anybody have any questions about what we have discussed so far? Okay, so the next thing I'd like to do is show you one of the screen reader versions of one of my zines. Well, I'll show you the digital version of my zine and the screen reader version of my zine. I picked this zine because it has a lot of illustration and it has a lot of hand lettering. And so this to me is a little bit harder to develop a screen reader edition for than just something like my LOL dying stuff zine is basically just text, and I basically just had to like copy and paste all the text, put in some page numbers and say like, this is a zine, here's what it looks like. So let me get my stuff open and see. Can you share this again? Okay, you see that? All right, this is my roomie's zine. I'm in my 30s and I live with a roommate, and I love living with my roommate. I like it better than living with a romantic partner. I like it better than living alone. And so this is all different examples of why I like living with a roommate, such as when I dropped a full mason jar of pecans on the floor and was already so tired I could cry. And my roommate was like, it's okay, you go to bed, I will help you clean that up. Or when we have an impromptu craft day, or when the dog needs to go out right now, just after he pukes on the rug. And when I'm out of spoons, but keep going and I need a reminder to sit the fuck down. That happens more frequently than I would like to admit. When we share our resources, like sharing a Netflix account or pooling our orders to reach a free shipping minimum. And this one's saying, don't forget my lube. And the other one's saying, don't forget my melatonin. So you can see that this is like a lot of cartoons, a lot of illustration, and a lot of hand lettering. And also we have these background patterns, right? I've made a choice in this zine, in this screen reader edition, to describe each of the different backgrounds, because I think that it does give an important, like, it's kind of important in the zine, right, to the aesthetic of it. If I had, here, let's see if I can open up. Can you see that still? Yeah. I'm never sure which box I'm in the Zoom screen sharing. So for the LOL dying stuff zine, you could see that it's very consistent throughout the whole thing, right? Like visually. So for this one, I made a note at the very beginning of the zine saying, this is what it looks like throughout the whole thing. And I said, it's got this patterned background, and it's got these white boxes, and it's got text that is typed, okay? And that's consistent throughout the whole thing. So I described it at the beginning, and then I'm done. The rest of it is text. For this one, I feel like it's important because these give, like, the fact that this page here has these little dog footprints on it, that is relevant to that page. They're not all like super, this one is just like polka dots, but it gives you that kind of pep. These large polka dots give it kind of like a chaotic feeling, right? So I kind of intentionally chose each of these patterns when I was making the zine. So I feel like they're relevant. So can you see this page too? Hang on, let's see. You can see this too with the, so this is the actual screen reader edition. This is, it's an actual like rich text file or TXT file you could do as well. I have considered whether or not it would be better to do it in, particularly in some of mine where they're more interactive, like my Imposter Monster zine is a workbook zine, and there's a lot of space to write in it. And so I've talked to people about whether or not that should be something that there's like an interactive PDF or a Google form type of thing, so that people using a screen reader still have that space that they can interact with it. However, the issue is that across screen readers, it's really hard to have consistency of what will work and what won't with something like a form. So my understanding is your best bet is to offer this as like a rich text file or a TXT file. And then that will be compatible across like all screen readers basically. And then this, you can send it by email. I'm going to have it available as a Etsy instant download. When people buy a digital edition of my zine, they will now also get the screen reader edition of my zine, and it'll just automatically download for them. And so this just like simplifies it. It should be compatible across all the different devices. That being said, do you see on this last page here, I do leave some room. Most of my zines, I leave some room for people to make notes about it. In this one, it's like, if you have fun memories of your roomies, like, make some notes about, or like write down your favorite memories of your roomies here. In my disability manifesto zine, it's like, write your own disability manifesto. In my trans affirmations zine, there's like, write some affirmations of your own. Like, there's always kind of like space for you to participate in the zine and my zines. So you can see at the top here where we start, before I even get into what the zine, the actual content of the zine is, I say, this is a zine. When it is printed, it is a handmade booklet in the size of a normal piece of paper, folded into quarters. In this zine, all elements are hand-drawn and hand-lettered, and some pages have drawings and text on top of decorative paper. There is space to write at the end of this zine, so you may want to prepare a way to take some notes that is accessible to you. And so that's what I've done across the board for the ones that have space to write. Some of them have space to draw as well. So I've done things like, let's see here. One of them has the Imposter Monster zine. We'll pull that one up later because we'll look at that one in detail because it's got so much workbook space. But if there's space to draw, you want to just make sure that if you're adding an interactive element like that, try to acknowledge that writing might not be accessible, is there a way you can make the interactive elements accessible to the person if you're making a screen reader edition? And also this part at the top is like, what can you set up in advance so that when you get into the individual pages, you're not in the weeds and you're not kind of getting into the overly complicated, every single time I have to say this thing that's over and over and over again. So like in the, in this one, at the top, I had said, you know, I've got these, I've got the polka dotted paper, you know, behind every page. That way I don't have to say, okay, page 2, there is a polka dotted paper in the background, and then there is a white text box with text. Page 5, there is a polka dotted paper in the background. You know, so I'm not repeating myself, and people don't have to listen to that again and again and again if it's consistent throughout. Any questions with where we're at right now? Okay, so then I get into the actual, the way I've set this up here. So I've got the description at the top of what it's about, like we just talked about. Then I've got my first page. My page 1 is my front cover. The bright teal cover of the zine has a heart in the style of a tattoo with a banner across it and an arrow through it. The hand lettering on the cover reads, "Roomies, a zine about interdependence by Mick Moran." One of the things that you can do here is that since this is something that you have created, you know all about it, right? So since I know that this is in the style of a tattoo, I can say it's in the style of a tattoo. You're not describing somebody else's thing that you don't know anything about it. And that can give you like a real shortcut. You know, you don't have to, actually, Sarah mentioned this to me when we were talking about this one. You see this page here with these little banners. So I described this page. This is the top front page. On the left page, a white background paper with decorative triangles meant to look like a banner flag. So I know that that's meant to look like a banner flag. And so instead of saying, there are multicolored triangles that are forming, you know, semicircles that are adjoined to each other with a, you know, a concave line above it, you know, you can describe it that way, but the better way to say it is, I know that this is meant to look like a banner. There's little decorative triangles. They look like a banner. So if you know that something looks like that way, you don't need to break it down into these tiny little parts when you can communicate it more clearly. Sometimes you have to do it that way if you're describing somebody else's image because you're not exactly sure. You're like, I think it looks like this. But if it's your thing, you can say, this is what it's meant to look like. Does that make sense? Okay, let's go back up to the top here. So in terms of the setup that I was talking about, that this may work for you, it may not work for you. The setup that I suggest that I've found that works for me is having this description at the top and then having your page 1 and then your, you know, you've got your front cover. And then I suggest that if you have your digital zines set up the way that I do, you may not, it may look different depending on like the format of your digital zines. Mine are, I actually went to art school, and so my digital zines are usually set up in either InDesign or Affinity Publisher, aka the cheap version of InDesign when you don't want to pay for Adobe Creative Cloud. So mine are set up like this. They look like, you know, these spreads like this. If yours do that as well, the way I've done this here is to say that I have pages 2 to 3, and then I say the left page has the same teal color and another heart, and then I say the right page has hand lettering. So I break it up into describing the left page and the right page. And the reason that I did that was because, let me bring you to this zine. Can you see that one? This is the Disability Manifesto zine. I started doing that when I started doing the screen reader edition for this zine because some of these work as spreads. So, you know, these 2 pages are separate here and they can be described as, oh, page 2, page 3. But when you look at pages 4 and 5, this one is a spread and you need to talk about it as a spread. So this is easier if you're able to say, you know, that these are interacting with each other. You know, you can choose to use the term spread if you want to. If you do, you might want to explain in the beginning what that means. I'm not sure that everybody has that language. So yeah, I go through here and I talk about, let's go to some of these that are a little more complicated. Let's go to this dog one. So on the right page, no, that's the wrong one. There it is. On the right page, a white background paper with tiny black paw prints. There is lettering that reads, "When the dog needs to go out right now," just after he pukes on the rug. The word "now" is written extra large and has stars inside for emphasis. The word "pukes" is written in a ghoulish style. There is a drawing of an unhappy looking Nico with the beard, glasses, beanie, and cane walking out the door with a dog on a leash, while a dismayed looking Mick approaches a spot on the carpet with paper towels and a cleaner. So for most of this zine, I did not describe anything about the actual hand lettering. I just differentiate between whether it is type like text that you would type into a computer or hand lettering. However, there are certain places like here that it makes a difference that that almost changes the meaning, right? That it's like in this like ghoulish font, or that it's like there's these stars to like, that really emphasizes that it's like the dog has to go out right now. There's going to be a disaster in the living room if not. And the same thing happens in this next spread where I have large decorative lettering on a teal background that reads, "When Nico gave me a pep talk that went, 'That's just your imposter syndrome talking. Do I need to lecture you about the artificial scarcity of capitalism? What kind of queer utopia am I raising you in? Biscuit?'" And next to Biscuit is a drawing of a dog with his head tilted in confusion at hearing his name and a question mark in a thought bubble above his head. Next to lecture is a tiny figure that appears to be shouting with exclamation points coming from it. The word "capitalism" is written in a style to make it look like the American flag with stars and stripes inside the letters. So in this spread, that's another good example of it because, you know, imposter syndrome is written in fun hand lettering, queer is written in fun hand lettering, but they don't necessarily change the meaning of it. But having like the stars and stripes inside of capitalism that makes it look like the American flag, that gives you additional context. And so that's why that's written that way. Does that make sense? Cool. So let me look at my notes. Okay, so you'll also notice in this screen reader that Mick and Nico, me and my current roomie / BFF, are repeating characters. So you see us here in the craft day, you see us here with the dog, and we're both here at the brunch party. And so in this context, if you read through this screen reader, Mick and Nico are named every time we appear. However, these other characters, including like random shouty person who is actually most of the time Nico, you know, like these characters that are ordering on their computer, they are not named. And so they're less important characters. These other roommates of mine that did Top Brunch with me, they're not named, they're not recurring. So if they are people that are repeating and you want to like emphasize that they are important, then you can name them. And that's kind of a thing in general as well. Like anything that's repeating that you want to emphasize, you can kind of give it more name, more detail. What else do I have in here to tell you? As much as you want to give some flair to your descriptions, you also, we talked a little bit about this earlier in terms of image descriptions, you don't want to give like get overly complicated. And as much as you can simplify and stuff it at the beginning, that's great. So let's see, I also have named things at the beginning, like this one has a lot of collage, or this one has a lot of photos, or things like that. The thing is about zines is that they are usually fairly short. So you can kind of give enough description in them that you can try to communicate the same amount of like personality. You know, zines often have this really amazing aesthetic, right? That is not seen in a lot of other places. That's like usually a lot of handmade stuff, usually like it's a lot of times it is very visually striking. So, you know, as much as you don't want to overcomplicate and draw out and give a lot of unnecessary detail, you know, you do want to make sure that you're communicating like what is so cool about your zine that makes it visually appealing. Does that make sense? What questions do we have? You can either, oh, do we have something in the chat? No. Okay, that's just chatting in the chat. Do we, you can either put a question in the chat, or you can unmute yourself if you have a question or a comment.
I have a question. Hi, my name's Alina. I am also looking to possibly make like a maybe just a text version. Mm-hmm. So instead of for like just like folks like me as well that have dyslexia, because like I can see the, you know, I can see the visuals, but I have trouble with text. I'm also curious if you have experience maybe doing an audio book. I know this is kind of or audio version of zine. Just thinking, branching off of that, because I'm just kind of daydreaming about that. So I'm just curious to see or talk about other ways that you're thinking about accessibility in form of your zines. Thank you so much for this workshop. It's really insightful, and I'm excited about your work.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. So you know, funny enough, I have not made audio versions of my zines. However, I think you came a little late, right? So you didn't hear me say that I work with the Doula Project in New York. And so I edited DIY Doula, Self-Care for Before, During, and After Your Abortion, which it was like a collaborative zine, which you can all see here if you'd like to look at that zine. And that, we had like 24 doulas contribute to it, and it's gone actually all around the world. People are using this as a resource. And I have thought a lot about like, can we translate this to all different languages? Can we, you know, make a screen reader version of it? And one of the things I thought about actually was making an audio version of that. And one of the reasons that came to mind for that particular zine was because I had gone to some particular workshop or conference or something, and apparently there's very, very, very poor education and in around sex ed, like, I mean, in general in the US, right? But like in particular, and we know with across the board with people with disabilities, but also somebody was telling me in particular with people who are deaf, that there was not a lot of like the same resources that we can just like Google where to get this or that, you know. There's not necessarily, not all people who are fluent in ASL are necessarily fluent in reading English, written English. And so the same like resources that we would be able to access by written English are not always available signed or, you know, in other capacities. So that was one of the things that I was thinking about, was like, how could we have a signed version of this? Could we have an audio version of this? Could we have a screen reader version of this? So it just like, I would love to have all of that for all of them. For the doula zine in particular, it's been like a volunteer capacity thing. But I think that zines to me are like so important because they are often created by people whose voices are not heard, right? So like we see so many people that are like, they're just not given space in traditional media. And so that's why they're so critical. And so we see like a lot of disabled people making zines. We see a lot of BIPOC people making zines. We see a lot of, do I say disabled? Do we see queer people, trans people making zines, right? So like, if we are recognizing that those are the groups that like need zines, then like we need to make them accessible to everybody, right? So yeah, the more that we can do that, I think that that is awesome. In terms of actually doing it, I think that it could be pretty simple in terms of if you've created a screen reader version of your zine, you could yourself read out the screen reader edition just into like a voice memo, and say like you're doing Etsy, you can upload I think up to 5 files at a time for a digital thing. So like say I have my Roomies zine, and I have, if you're buying the digital edition, you're buying the you get the PDF, then you get the text file, and then maybe you get an MP3 also. I'm not 100% sure that Etsy lets you do MP3s, but like let's say they do. You just offer, like when you buy the digital, you get all of the accessible versions. And that just, you know, I think that that's totally a reasonable thing to do. You could upload them to YouTube if you want to offer them like for free and to make it more widely accessible. Yeah, I think the more that we can like encourage more broad accessibility, especially during things like, you know, this particular like sick and disabled fair, like we see that there are disabled makers that want to be doing this stuff and want to be accessing each other's work. The more we can like make it accessible to all of us is like the better, right? That was probably a $10 answer to a 5-cent question, but okay. Question is, I make audio zines and I'm wondering if the guides on describing that it's a zine would be a good idea. When reading these zines, since I'm not the writer or artist for much of it, is there a suggested tone to read the written submissions? So I haven't actually done audio zines yet. I think it's a great idea. I think if you are doing submission-based zines, you might want to, if you're, you know, if you are continuing to like put out calls for submissions in the next one, you could say like your submission may be included in an audio-based zine. You could ask people if they want to read their own, if that's something that would work for you. Or you could also ask people if there's like anything that they want you to be aware of when you are, when you're reading theirs for them. Other than that, I think like, if you are the one that's kind of collecting the work, in a sense, you are the editor of the zine. And I think that like that's how I felt in a sense about being like the editor of the doula zine, is that like I kind of compiled them all and I, you know, chose the page order and I did a lot of the like nitty gritty kind of work, herding the cats. So, you know, if you like look at yourself as the editor of this publication, then I think that it's also appropriate for you to kind of decide what that tone should be based on reading through the entire work together, or, you know, or looking at individual pieces and deciding on your own. If you're not able to get that guidance from individual writers or artists, because I think in a sense you are contributing to that as well. Other questions for the moment? Okay. Does anybody want to see anything else of this, or, oh, you know what? Let's look at the monster zine for a minute. Does anybody want to look at any other pages of this more closely, of the Rumi zine more closely, or or did you want to see any of the descriptions more closely before we move on to another part? This is not my computer, so we're a little. Okay. Okay, so this is, can we see this? We can all see the new zine. Yeah. Okay, so this is my Imposter Monster zine. It's the second edition. It's a workbook zine about imposter syndrome. This one, I put off making a workbook version. I put off making a screen reader version of for a long time because it is, it's a lot of interactive, and I wasn't quite sure, like I mentioned earlier, I wasn't sure whether I should try to do an interactive form or something, but when I had a chat with my friend who is blind and uses a screen reader about it, about this one specifically, what we discussed was, since it's so difficult to make something consistent that's accessible from like one screen reader to another screen reader to another screen reader, the solution that I've come up with is to tell people at the beginning that it's a workbook zine. There are opportunities to write and draw your thoughts, and you may want to prepare a way to take some notes that is accessible to you. And now what that may mean is that somebody is listening to the screen reader edition on their phone and they're taking notes on their computer, or they're using Braille to take notes, whatever that looks like for them. But they have the kind of warning in advance at the top of the zine that they can, that they're going to want to find a way to take notes to work through this zine. So, so if you just like take a glance at this, you can see that this one has like a lot of empty space in it, right? So, because this is mostly just prompts for you to work through. So this one, I just read you that it's a workbook zine. And then the part that I wanted to call out to you for this was in this page here. So imagine that your imposter syndrome is a monster who lies to you, and I tell you to name your monster, and like, you know, then you can identify that, you know, you could just tell your imposter syndrome, like, oh, just go away, Tom, I don't want to deal with you right now. And then the next page, you get to draw your monster. And that obviously would not be accessible to some people. Some people might want to draw anyway, but if I put a note in here, if drawing is not accessible to you, take a moment to imagine what your monster would look like and jot down a few notes about it. And I did something similar in the trans zine as well. This one has, so like draw a picture of yourself in the most gender affirming outfit you can imagine. Is it your favorite outfit or something brand new? Oh, you look awesome. So this one, I wrote something similar. I said, you know, if it's not accessible for you to draw, then, you know, imagine yourself in that outfit, take some notes about what you were wearing, something like that. So basically, and I actually didn't catch that on my first pass through on this when I was writing it. I was kind of, I actually don't have this zine is so old that I didn't have the text to copy and paste. I had to retype it all. I didn't catch that on the first time about the drawing. And so I had to go back and add that note. So kind of try to take a second pass through your screen reader version, especially if there's like any interactive components, and think about, is there anything here that is not going to make sense if you've got, and you know, if you're not looking at this page. Questions at the moment? Okay, so what I thought we could do now is, if people brought a zine with them, you could start to spend a few minutes working on developing a screen reader edition of that zine. And then we can take a look at them together. If you run into any roadblocks, we can talk about it. Yeah, does that sound, did everybody bring a zine to work with? If you don't have a zine to work with, I can put up a zine, and I can put up, I have a single, a mini zine that I could put up that people can work with. Let's see. How's it in here?
I also have a question.
Yep.
Have you heard of any zines that work from the opposite, like, you know, where it's audio, it's first an audio zine and then it gets translated into a, like what we see as like, I don't know, I'm just curious if those are out there, like in the sense of like maybe a screen reader zine or a braille zine that gets translated to what we see as like come to known as like a traditional zine.
I haven't heard of, I mean, when you say a zine, like an audio zine that wasn't a traditional zine, that kind of makes me think podcast. I don't know if there's anybody that has, I haven't heard of any. Has anybody else in the room heard of anybody that's doing, that's doing audio zines that have gone into traditional zines? Does anybody have any links that they want to drop in the chat? I'm sure it's out there, right? Like, we're not all resources for translating to other languages. Best practices for translating to other languages is actually to have a native speaker do the translation. So if I wanted to translate something to Spanish, I speak a little bit of Spanish. I would not go and do that myself. I would probably find somebody that wanted to translate their zine into English, and I would try to make a trade with them. Or I would, see if I could pay somebody or barter with somebody, so that I could, because it's really best practices to have a native speaker do it. I think like in the zine community, skill sharing is often like it's so community based that I think that you could probably find somebody that would like be willing to do a trade with you, like, oh, I'll translate yours, you translate mine. And how to make a text file, I just use TextEdit. I use Mac. I use the TextEdit, and the other way to do it is if you're using something like Google Docs or Microsoft Word, you just have to do a save as, and then instead of getting a .doc at the end, you'll get a .txt, or you can get a .rtf. .rtf just means that it's going to save, like if you use like any formatting, the txt file usually doesn't have any like fancy formatting. It's just the text. So if you have any formatting, it'll hang on to it in the RTF file, which may or may not be useful depending on what it is for a screen reader, but it might be useful for you while you are looking at it if it helps you visualize on the page and keep things organized. Like if you need your headings to look a certain way for your brain to keep it organized. Does that make sense? Okay, thanks, Gabe. It was good to have you. I hope Gabe's gone already. Okay. All right, so I have this. Oh, we have one more in the chat here. Only done one audio version and it's not up yet. I need to edit it. I don't have links to any audio zines, but they've come up on my feed a fair amount. I just want to mention that they're out there. They're nothing in common. Cool. So we'll, I wonder if there's a, I'll take a look actually while you all start to work. I'll take a look and see. I wonder if there's like an audio zine hashtag or something like that on Instagram that I could find. Let's see if I can track something down while you all start to work. So let me see if I can. Okay, this is my one-page mini zine, how to make a medical cheat sheet, which I reference in like most of my other zines. I take a cheat sheet with me to the doctor whenever I go, and it's got all of my like allergies and medications and surgeries and all that stuff on it. And my providers love me for it. And so this is a how to make that. Let me see if I can do this one more time. This is what it looks like, or a template for it. By the way, you can get a free copy of this on my free donation-based copy of this if you visit my Imposter Monster Zines table at the fest. It's okay if that's the only thing that you want to order. And so this is what it looks like on the inside when you unfold it. And then if you, I tell people that if they want to email me, then they can get a blank template. So I'll just, if you don't have a zine to work with of your own, I will leave this open, and then you can look at, now this is going to be a little bit trickier for you to work with because these are, let me see if I can find a way to number these for you. Like this is front cover, obviously, this is back cover, and then you've got your inside pages. Why don't you just heading them for now, and then we can put them in the right order afterwards, because I think it's gonna get in your way if I try to write on this too much right now. Okay, does everybody have that to work with or something to work with? And why don't we start with like 10 minutes, and if people are having questions, they can unmute or write in the chat. And if people are feeling like they want to move on or share, then, you know, before that time, just give a shout. And I'm gonna see if I can find some audio zines. All right, let me know if you have questions in the meantime.
Sorry about that. Oh God.
Um, um, is it for a particular? I think I've used them the way that I would use them in writing generally. So like I used them as numerals in my pages, and then if I like, you know, were to spell out a word elsewhere, I might have spelled it out. So I think that, and it seemed to go fine when I had these pre-read for me. So I don't think that there's a preference. I can look it up as well.
Like I have like the size of my zine is 5.5 inches by 5.5 inches.
Mhm.
So I just used like numerals for that.
I think that that's fine. If I were doing that, I would probably spell out inches rather than put the
Yeah.
quotation mark. That's the only thing I would flag about that.
Okay.
Because I don't know, I think that it would probably read the quote as a quote. You know?
Yeah.
So I'm linking again in the chat. This is a guide for punctuation and symbols for screen readers. They did a test across a bunch of different screen readers to see about compatibility. The bottom line is that it is it's rarely consistent across the board. And also users can adjust their settings so they can tell, so that they don't have to listen to every single time that there's a full stop or a period, or every time that there's a comma. So people can say, I don't want to listen to every single comma that is read. So that this article has some more about that if there's a particular symbol or detail that you're trying to find in that. Great. Does anybody else have any issues they're running into as they start to work? So it's up to you all. We can either like basically spend the rest of the time working, and if you want, sharing some of what you have worked on. If you feel like you would rather do the rest of this on your own, that's all right as well. But I'm happy to stay here for the rest of the time to see if you run into like any issues while you are while you're starting to develop your own screen reader editions. I also don't want to hold anybody here that is like, okay, I think that was a lot of information and I need to let it sit in my brain for a while before I do anything with it.
I wouldn't mind sharing what I have so far.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. It's kind of long. I'm just starting on like the general description. I haven't gotten into my pages.
Cool. Do you have a visual that we could look at as well, by any chance?
Okay. So this is my zine. This is the cover. It's black and white with text that says "not pretty," with a little hand drawing of a person's legs kind of cut off, with wearing socks, and they have like leg hair. And then it says poems by Ray Solar, illustrations by Courtney Hasman at the bottom. And my dead name is crossed off because I made this before I transitioned, and it has my chosen name above it. And then, yeah, so then throughout the zine, I have like my poems with my friends' illustrations. And they're all kind of the same format throughout all of the pages. So like I've decided to just kind of describe the format in some amount of detail since it is kind of all the same. Let's see if I can find it over here. Okay, so I have Not Pretty Zine Screen Reader Edition as the title of the thing. Maybe I can show this. I don't know if you can see that very well. Sort of. Okay. So I wrote description: a zine containing a collection of poems written by Ray Solar, each accompanied by drawings made by Courtney Hasman. The zine is square, 5 by 5.5 by 5.5 inches, and printed on standard white printer paper. And then design. The zine has the same design throughout. The background is white with black text and colored illustrations. Each page has the poem title at the top left, with the poem text underneath and a small illustration on the right side. The poem titles are in a bold handwritten font with all lowercase letters. The poem text is typed in a very small typewriter style font. The text is all left aligned. The illustrations are crudely drawn with pencil outline and colored sporadically with crayon or colored pencil. That's all I have so far.
That's awesome. I like how you broke it down into like the description and the design. I think that can be really helpful. And I think that loading up all of that information at the front is like the way that you've described it. All those illustrations is really helpful. And then if you want to say like, this illustration is of like, I think I saw eyes on one.
Right.
You know, people already know what the style is without you having to say a crudely drawn, da da da. So I think that would be really, really like fit well with somebody that's going to listen to that.
Cool.
Anybody else have comments, questions? Thank you for sharing that. Do people feel like excited to make screen reader versions of the zines? Yeah.
I think I'm probably going to continue doing audio. I was the person that Ray was messaging into the chat.
Oh yeah, to do audio. Yeah.
Mostly crashed. But I think I'm going to continue to do audio zines for some of them, like Transvestia, which is the one that's super submission based. But I think that for some of my like pocket zines with very simple illustrations, that's mostly like type that I've already typed up, and it's not necessarily all hand lettering. I would do like screen reader versions also. Yeah, and kind of have different versions of those. But I think the Transvestia ones, those are just like a massive project to take on to do a screen reader, because a lot of it is not typed, and I format everything by hand too, so I'd have to go in, and it's like some of them are like 48 pages. So yeah.
So something to think about if it's typed, and you know, if you're used to reading them. Well, first of all, if you've gotten submissions from people, then are they submitting art to you in a JPEG or something like that, or are they submitting text?
Yeah, there's like
interpreting it
videos, photography, art, like paintings and whatever, and then also text and poetry and whatever.
Okay, so if you are already used to reading them aloud, what you could try doing is running dictation software while you're reading them, or reading them into dictation software as well. Like maybe it wouldn't work to do it at the same time, but you could capture a lot of the text that way if you wanted to do that way.
Yeah, do you have a suggestion about dictation software? Because I've tried to find some that are good, that are inexpensive or free, because I don't have a lot of money. And I haven't really been able to find any that are really all that good for me, because I mean, because I audio describe all of the images when I'm doing the audio version.
Oh, so you're already kind of doing the work.
I'm doing it, I'm just not typing it in, because
right,
that takes longer, and I have mobility issues in my hands.
Yeah, sure, of course.
And so a dictation software would be great, because then it would capture those image descriptions that I'm just saying. But I just haven't found one that is good.
What kind of devices are you using?
I have a PC computer.
And what about your phone?
My phone is Apple.
Okay, so I have both used the Apple built-in dictation, and I have also used Google's is pretty good now too. So if you like open up Google Docs on your PC, and and then you allow it to access your microphone. You know, you obviously have to like tell it that you want a full stop and a comma and stuff like that, but you also can just do that in editing mode if you would prefer to do that. You can like, you know, talk out all the stuff and then you go back and, or, you know, again, this is something that you could probably barter with somebody to do if you, you know, oh, you know, I'll dictate yours if you want to edit mine, you know, whatever kind of thing. Yeah, so you could do it either. So I use both of those. I use either Google Docs and then the Apple one. If you don't use Siri, it might work better if you like let Siri listen to your voice and learn your voice.
Right.
Yeah, but I find them both like, when I use them, they're both pretty good. When my mom uses them, uses Siri to text me, it's like, you know, she's in the car on a Bluetooth speaker and I get these really like garbled messages. So I don't know if that's like the best representation of it, but I think like when I use in voice to text these days, it's
Yeah, my
good.
phone doesn't. I've tried doing voice to text for texting or for putting things in notes and everything, and it does not like me. So yeah. I frequently have to go in and edit, and it takes more work than just typing it.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would try the Google one. Google has been Google even understands me. I'm learning Italian on Duolingo. I'm not good at it, and Google understands me in Italian. So like when I like talk to Google Translate.
Cool.
And so I feel like if it understands my Italian accent, then it probably is doing pretty well.
Yeah, we us organizers, me, Ray, and then the other folks, we're using Google Meets to meet with their captions, and one of our organizers has a slight, I think it's a Mexican accent, but just not, you know, US American. And Google actually does a pretty good job where most other caption things they've said, like do not. So
one day the robots are just going to take over.
Yeah.
All right. What else can I advise anybody on before we wrap things up today? Everybody has their links, right, to go with this. I guess the chat probably gets saved as well in these Zoom things.
I'm not sure if the chat gets saved. Every time I enter it, it doesn't show me what's before. So I don't know if it does, but I have taken both of the resource links that you posted about how to write image descriptions and the one you just did about screen readers reading punctuation. And I'm adding them to the sensory room page, which at the bottom has a bunch of accessibility resources.
Well, this was cool. This is the first time I've ever run this workshop, and I think I would do it again.
Yeah, you totally should. It went really well. I definitely learned a lot. Yeah, it's awesome. I'm going to be posting this, the screen recordings that I did to YouTube, and then also linking those to our live events page. But if you end up doing another like recorded one or anything separately, and you end up uploading it to YouTube for whatever reason, because last year we had somebody do a whole video on image description specifically, and we just linked their video to that page also. And those pages are up basically year round. So
oh, cool.
Yeah.